Chilly here with Sirius Talis Moon Hour, Venus Day, and the Moon 2020 Libra, applying to oppose Chiron Venus, ingressing to Aries, and midheaven ruled by Venus. Let's talk about Venus going from the applied sextile to Pluto to the square, closing a synodic cycle with Saturn and Neptune, from the sextile to Uranus to the conjunction with Chiron and Aries, and towards making an aspect, a harmonious aspect with the node. So a lot of Venus, Venus in Aries, Mars in Pisces. Venus in Aries is the union of value and assertion. If Aries is the I am, Venus Aries is I am my values. Okay, Aries second house or Aries Venus really need to go through the process of getting very accurate about what their value is because it's a part of their identity. For example, I have Aries second house and I talk about sense of self beyond being a value. What makes sense of self and what needs to be there for sense of self and sense of self as a value. For example, value in relationships, value when it comes to vocation and career. Venus here has quite the signification of an Aries second house, and transiting Aries, it's the active Venus, Venus that acts for her values. Her values is her I am. Venus here can be competitive. For example, it can be a composition of a beauty pageant as much as a Xena warrior. And so, um, and Venus here, let's just say I was going through to buy me some clothes because I absolutely needed them. That's very Venus Aries. Okay. I'm one of the only women that the entire society, allies and enemies, would already want me to shop for clothes. So I came to the shop with something that looked like something that a homeless would donate me pants. That can be very Venus Aries. But when Venus Aries pays attention to that needed thing, she's going to be very accurate. And then I think I tried 10 pairs of pants, and there was an insisting that I come out with a purchase. And then the obvious next stop was the sports clothes, because clothes with Venus Aries have a function. oh, it's gonna get warm soon. I'm gonna need something that looks good and takes the sweat. uh, oh, I'm going to need pants that I can actually um, do war dance with. Um, the last time I did a war dance, an entire community that sacrifices people to so-called the war god was exposed. Um, yesterday I also did a war dance. So, but Venus was in Pisces. So with Venus in Pisces, military style might might be the case. And by the way, I was almost going for these, olive green colors, and I was like, that's not the time to look like something that's not a civilian. That's not the time for army style clothes. Try to look, you are a civilian, try to look as civilian as possible. So the next up was sports clothes and for the functionality of them. So and I was laughing at myself because when I was nearly almost living in the pool and the gym, I barely had sports clothes. And not only that, I would go to the gym, I paid for the gym, and then I would come and do freeletics as preparation for calisthenics, which is body weight exercise. It's kind of like go to the gym, do burpees, and come out and pay for the air condition. Zero sport clothes. Um, so it was funny how the functionality, and the reason now is that I was barely able, um, being in wartime with all kinds of weird experiments that are not done with consent on civilians, then I wasn't able to actually get fit in a past decade, um, which I talked about with my academic studies and the fact that I did actual science in academia, which is verboten. So um, the good news is that I'm not on Epstein list. Perhaps unlike some of my peers, I don't know. Haven't checked the 30 million files. So, Venus Aries. More symbolism of Venus Aries. Um, it's definitely a time where becoming fit becomes a value. Um, and depending on whether it operates more healthy or not, then people might take that to think about freeletics, which was it's not about losing weight but gaining muscle, which is the kind of healthy Aryan, versus the people that really, really want to look, the best and so on and so forth. Um, and that can both can be an expression of that Venus Aries. Venus Aries, if you're doing a workout or if you're getting fit, be very aware because it can get incredibly competitive about looks. And Aries doesn't compete with others, it competes with themselves. But you kind of want to make sure that sense of self is maintained not just through the physical body, but through the soul inside the body. And Neptune is going to be of help in that. With co-presence of Venus, Neptune in Aries, be very wary of taking anything that would enhance your sportive activity but create malabsorption of vitamins. Um, More Venus Aries. Venus Aries in general. Um, Very good to find an active outlet for that Venus Aries. So much so that she can relax. Because with Venus is usually a drawing in and attracting quality, and Aries is taking action. So the way I would think to work with that is to take action on our values or to be doing fitness that is pleasurable to us. For example, dancing um, or activity that really it's kind of gets the blood pumping, but um, it's kind of like put that action there so that you can later relax and still enjoy the receptive qualities of Venus. If it's a natal position, that might be especially helpful because getting fit, taking action, and so on and so forth, taking action on one's values is so accentuated with Venus Aries, and then it can allow time to relax. Then Venus also feels more confident to relax, to enjoy, to draw in, which is not so, um, doesn't come so naturally with Aries, but because Aries can be competitive about developing a skill, then Venus Aries can actually really learn that. So it's kind of like the feminist women that if they learn something about relationships or communication, they just write to-do list, exercise, so, practice that, and so on and so forth, because it's just a more active um, and self-assertive Venus. Now to the aspects. Venus is applying to conjoin Saturn and Neptune, and this is the time for us to end commitments that are no longer aligned with our values or end the parts in our relations that are no longer aligned with our values. Um, we might also see a culmination. For example, today there was a bombing and I was running to the shelter. Um, I look very funny running, trying to hold everything in place. um, and in the shelter, I both saw how my taking action and expressing my values with do it by feet, particularly with with a social engineering that was actually intelligent, was accumulating to a lady making sure that when she made a mistake of asking me to get up so that more people can enter, and I couldn't stand, then she later made sure um, that I'm okay and that she hasn't triggered a thing, which was actually very reassuring and actually needed. So that was accumulating action to the cycle of Venus where I did do it by fate and where Saturn was in Pisces and accentuated on the feeling in society when a person cannot stand. And so that was kind of like, hey, that that became an accumulative action where people are more aware around me. Um, and furthermore, I met another woman that was researching into medicine because she was happy that I have the notification. She said she needs to change her phone because I had the notification from the home front command within basically a shelter that had no internet connection. So I didn't have internet connection, but these notifications I was getting when no one was getting those. And then I'm like, darling, you should not be so jealous of me. Because that means my phone is surveilled. I'm a civilian, but my phone is surveilled. We started to talk about my research. Um, so I had a nice conversation where I could enjoy something that I had set fierce boundaries to, and basically haven't been partaking in too many academic discussions. And that was the kind of accumulating effect of being aware and being able to talk about um, what I'm going through, not in big detail, but in a way that was relieving somewhat of the isolation that I had dealt with in the past 5 to 10 years. And also the people around me, because there are secondary traumas. Um, um, so, with Venus ending a cycle with Saturn, we'll both have the lucky results, the miraculous healing, particularly with Neptune, the miraculous healing, the happy results of the Venusian efforts we've been taking since Venus conjoined Saturn in Pisces. And at the same time, it will be a good chance to redefine what are our the values, goals, and strategy for the coming Venus Saturn cycle, because we will have Venus conjoining Saturn in Aries again. Um, Venus Neptune very adjacent to Saturn, and it can be miraculous healing of some sort and a reality check of some sort. If we have been extremely isolated, we might find a sense of trust, or a sense of being able to self-assert within relation, that could be even miraculously found. And at the same time, we can experience a sudden loss of union, loss of relation, or sudden ending of relation that can cause us grief. But basically, it is because it is aligning with our values. Let's say we have been trying to assert ourselves in the face of trauma bond based society. Now can be a time where certain relations are all miraculously or ending, but it can be also a sudden loss or a dissolution of a relation that can cause some grief, but it may be because we have aligned with our values and our values weren't compatible with certain people around. Or alternatively, we can find um, find the common ground miraculously, and it can happen due to a certain loss or even sudden eurekas, with Venus still separating from the sextile, still ruling Uranus. Now to the upcoming sextile with Pluto. Venus sextile Pluto is, and let's take a look at the aspects themselves. So Venus will conjoin um, Neptune tomorrow, and on March 8th, she will conjoin Saturn. Venus will. Where's Pluto? Oh, let's go to the Venus breakdown. Venus will sextile Pluto on March 8th. On March 10th, sorry. On March 10th, with the moon applying to that and applying to conjoin Lilith in the background. So the sextile will be from degree 4. And degree 4 is degree of foundation. If there is business or real estate involved, degree 4 can mean foundation to the business, foundation to the real estate deal or union or merge and acquisition, and foundation to do with housing because it's degree 4 of degree of the moon. So all of those issues can arise. There may be the need to reestablish trust regarding housing, real estate, and business following the Epstein-like dynamics. Saturn ruling Pluto on degree 2 um, creates those issues regarding any partnership, cooperation, a foundation where there is a relation between two. It can be business partners, it can be um, tenant landowner, it can be um, roommates or business partners or cohabiting of some sort. And with the sextile, if we have been tending to the issue, I know I have, then we may have established some good foundation or stable solution, which can come with Venus still ruling Uranus. It can come quite as a eureka, quite suddenly. It can be even that we have been working and thinking about this issue for incredibly long time, placing all the needs, the concerns, the fears, the opportunities, the requirements, the things to consider. And for example, claustrophobia and agoraphobia after war, post-traumatic people and suddenly screaming at night, waking up not knowing that that they were screaming, people that are recovering from sexual boundary violation and there is a sex trafficking or around them. Which, by the way, that can create secondary trauma even for the sex trafficked people because it triggers. Okay, it's basically somebody waking up at night screaming, all the rapists die, killing all the rapists, whoever does trafficking is murdered, and so on and so forth. And going into complete purging, which is necessary to align the nervous system Okay, it's a body-mind healing technique of to let all the rage in a constructive way towards the actual target that created the problem. No, I'm not talking about, attacking people. And that includes kicking and shouting and screaming and raging and so on. And it's necessary to get the energy out of the body to create rejuvenation and regulate the nervous system, come back to sense of self and self-trust when we talk about body-mind curation from trauma. Now, of course, these type of traumas, people don't trust, let's say, any type of recovery infrastructure because of the experiments that are done on people. Okay? Venus Pluto is exactly where we tend to these taboo things. And Pluto here can denote with Venus, particularly in Mars sign, recovery from sexual trauma and housing that's compatible to basically sense of self, zero rape, zero slavery housing. Also environment, because moon is also environment. For example, when I was today at the shelter, there were people calling to keep the door open, and they were talking about claustrophobia. Again, how this Venus closing cycle with Neptune and Saturn, well, I have been raising awareness to that for years because I have been working with and residing with people that had PTSD, even other than myself. To me, it actually began as secondary trauma. Um, I mean, not everything, but the awareness. And also, there was a situation where I took on me certain things because I knew that addressing them would raise issues to do with rape that the other person or a sibling went through, and I somehow, even nobody told me that, but somehow I knew not to trigger them, so I took on myself certain things that probably created a lot of complication in my life because I had to take upon me certain tagging that um, that so that I wouldn't address the actual trauma that the not only me but the person next to me also went through in their lives. Um, so this is going to be a sextile that has a very foundational undertone. Being exposed to trafficking in academia created prolonged, basically, trauma. Being exposed to trafficking that involved hospitals and psychologists exposed me to intense, prolonged trauma. Tending to the topic of ritual abuse with zero available framework to process things definitely created a lot. Being targeted for my research that would expose Epstein ring Not because that's what I tended to, but because of science. Going through prolonged lack of consideration in that condition from the sources that try to cover up for their involvement with Epstein ring, again, is something that has accumulated to something. Having every single attempts to recover my ability to make a living in a way that honors my body, my soul, my heart, my sanity, my identity has been beyond profoundly disturbing of my life. And dealing with a decade long of intense oppression, smear campaigns, deprivation from resources that are helpful, not in the context of a bait or an assassination attempt or kidnapping attempt. Being singled out and isolated from any access to justice that does not serve, again, as a bait. Having technologies and techniques that are being held on purpose as scientific controversy to further prevent me from maintaining sense of self, healthy life satisfaction and joy. Abuse of every single power, from medical to sorting out academic conflicts, and even intelligence positions of people against me as civilian, because I tended to the fact that raping people as training for intelligence creates terrorists, creates detrus, and creates intelligence failures and infiltration. And the fact that many people are forcibly going through those things as civilians when they never applied to be any part of any intelligence. And the awareness that when people are forcibly tortured at hospitals, what comes out is political assassination, megalithic terroristic events, acts of treason, okay? Crimes against humanity. All those that are serving as wealth consolidation over natural resources in a way that creates economic and security bubbles and perpetual states of war. Okay? Venus sextile Pluto is a very deeply transformative, foundational level of configuration or yoga. Now let's continue on the Venus journey. Venus basically ingresses to Taurus. She's conjoining Chiron 27 March and ingresses to Taurus on March 30. The conjoining of Chiron is also the conjoining with Aries, and this is on 25 degrees Aries. And this is closing of a cycle that actually did begin in Aries. Okay, because Chiron was in Aries also last year. Um, Venus Chiron conjunction is tending to a wound that we have around sovereignty. Mars will be 9 degrees Pisces. Jupiter direct still 15 degrees Cancer. And the moon will accentuate on this aspect because it will go through Jupiter. So we can try to think back about a year and something ago. Venus, Chiron, Aries can be people having to promote gender affirming care when they went through forced gender or sex change. Thanks, Anya Wick, for exposing those things. People dealt with the ritual abuse. They were abusing women until they became masculine and raping men and feminizing them as coercive feminization ritual. So those were topics that I saw in the past year regarding Venus Chiron. A lot of people that were dealing with what they called narcissistic abuse syndrome, may throughout this Venus cycle realize that that was the result of the kidnapping of people by intelligence and the torturing of them to loss of sense of self, using them for both terroristic activities and forced espionage. Without ability or access to reach out for help. That may denote at the gladio effects of the unification of the Nazi scientists in the aftermath of Paperclip and mafiosi organizations or organized crime, mafia, that became informants. And of course, the ever not so ethical oil companies and banking and investment conglomerates. So Venus Chiron is probably going to tend to another layer, or first of all, culminate something, or we may even find that we have embodied more sense of self since last year. Or we have been more aware that the sense of self needs embodiment since last year. We may have become acutely aware, okay, by the end of this month, since the last year, that our sense of self, zero rape, zero slavery, zero ritual abuse, is a prerequisite to understand our sexual orientation and gender identity. And we may have addressed in what in our sexual orientation and gender identity has been trauma based identity rather than authentic identity, if those differ. Any wound around our ability to look after ourselves, whether it's getting fit, whether it's financial freedom, whether it's our appearance. Hello? That we may have been addressing for a year, we may be able to embody more of those values. And we may be opening a chapter where we deal with other things on this topic. For example, people that went through forced gender change, or even people that went through gender affirming care, might require lifelong compensations for the atrocities they went through and the lack of information they received. People that have been victims of the Epstein rings activities may require lifelong compensations as a result of basically the traumas that they have been dealing with. We might be holding accountable businesses that worked with targeting individuals, MK Often and MK Ultra. Bless you. Now, as usual with these things, the more effectively, authentically tending to it without excluding people's sovereignty or right to sense of self is the way to go. Power plays on those things. Bless you. Is very likely to lead to a crisis where if people wanted to focus on as a community abolishing, let's say, MK Often, calling to declassified technologies, and so on and so forth, any any sort of power plays on that, as Venus is slowly approaching the square with Pluto. She will square Pluto from Taurus, but she's leaving the sextile. Any of those issues, they can really malefically backfire because they're gonna get people to say names when they previously preferred to talk about structure. It's kind of like, hey, nobody's going to say your name if you have been calling to abolish the classified project budget. You're calling to abolish the MK Often. You've been calling to declassify classified technologies. You've been actively working on also the places where you as a business were put into circumstances that were extortive or life risking. But for heaven's sakes, don't take it out on the people that your business took part in targeting, for example. Sovereignty is top at everything here. Nobody can claim that they trained someone that never consented to be trained. And this is also where relations, I think about, I don't know if it was last year, but I think so. There was this case of a trainer, a fitness trainer that was sexually harassing someone on camera, and then the footage leaked. And there was another case where I think it was an affair. So I don't remember. One was sexual harassment, one was affair. But the fact that the footage leaked already made it rape towards them both. And it's like, hey, they're not supposed to be having sex, I don't know, in the gym, but it's kind of like, well, if it bothered no one, it's kind of like no biological hazards, then, and that's between them. So it's kind of like, okay. But the fact that footage leaked, and I think the lady was married or something, so that was like a big Venus Chiron in the sign of fitness. Ouchie. It's created a whole lot of controversy with people forgetting that the footage of people having sex without filming them without their consent is basically raping them. Yes, Venus Chiron here unfortunately can still be issues around, you know, do people honor sovereignty in also sexual relations? And of course, the intricacy of where, let's say, with Epstein like occult, there is mind control, and the actual physical or astral appearance of a person might not be the identity of the original person that committed the offense. So I know it looks like some heavy undertones, but all in all, while Venus is considered in detriment in Aries, because it's opposite to the sign that she rules, she's not bad in Aries. It's just a sign where Venus has no it takes no bullshit around who she is and who she isn't. And it has some sort of a feminist undertone, because the thing with Venus here, it's not like Leo where she talks about respect and so on and so forth. It's more like that this is the I am. Because Aries is usually competing more with itself than with others. If an Aries Venus transit yields to somebody, I don't know, clearing their name or clearing their reputation, it must be because some survivalistic issue is at hand. And this is where Venus in Aries is not compromising. Recording. Recording. If I think about Venus Aries transits, this is the time where a person would set boundaries to their parents, to their boss, to the psychologist, to the psychiatrist, to the military, to the country, to the state, to the heads of everything, to God, if it violates their sense of self or tries to enslave them, including weapon companies. And the people that count on the Venus Aries to compromise the sense of self and the I am, let's just say this is a very bad transit for people whose sense of self is defined by dominating or enslaving others. I don't mean safe, sane, consensual, kinky settings. For that, go to Evie Lupine. She's the authority figure on that. Okay? Mama recording, not now. Not for me. This is also where when we had Uranus Aries conjoining squaring Pluto here, that's the time where people took no bullshit. They called narcissistic behavior for what it is. They called gaslighting for what it is. There was no, it was the no bullshit time. The procedure of the jurisdiction, the right of the public to know that that person is a sex offender. And no one should have to even be in position that they need to set these boundaries. At the work, at an apartment, at any setting. Okay. And as I'm talking about the energy, that's the thing. When it comes to the sense of self, zero rape, zero slavery, there's no consideration. No one, absolutely no one, not even God, has the right over that. The rage here, again, there's nothing particularly 22 in about that, but it can be beyond murderous. This is the rage of the father that killed the molester of his daughter. This is the rage of a soldier that takes their gun and shoots the entire unit that enabled their rape. This is the rage of a child that intercepts a weapon delivery and shoots a missile at the school, the academia, the military base, the whatnot, the Pentagon, for all that child is concerned, that was raping that child in some Epstein Island. Like I said, okay? Zero rape, zero slavery. Nothing is preceding that. Nothing is above that. If we remember that and we apply, we do not violate that, there's no problem. It will just mean military clothes back in style, or going to going to the gym to get fit. That's what it means. Now the Venus ingress to Taurus. This is where she will be applying to square Pluto. But the good news is that in the coming 20 years, Venus will be squaring Pluto from her home sign, which means it's Venus in Taurus. Venus squaring Pluto from Aries gave us the Me Too, gave us people litigating the entire academia for a trafficking ring within it. Oh, the moon. Venus in Taurus is standing on solid ground, as she better be. She better be having her own land, her own home. Her own garden.